In Philadelphia. Jesus, accompanied by 10 apostles, arrived in Philadelphia on Wednesday, February 22. In the following days, the apostles met frequently with the disciples to discuss how they could safeguard the message of the kingdom in this region. They were very pleased with the progress the gospel had made in Philadelphia and the nearby villages. There lived in Philadelphia a very wealthy and influential Pharisee who had accepted Abner's teachings. And he invited Jesus to come for the Sabbath morning meal before the synagogue service. In addition to Jesus, 40 prominent Pharisees were invited to this breakfast. When Jesus arrived and was talking with Abner at the door while the host had already taken his seat, a prominent Pharisee from Jerusalem, who was a member of the Sanhedrin, entered. He went straight to the place of honor to the left of the host. However, this place was reserved for Jesus, with the place on the right reserved for Abner. Thus, the host corrected this. This dignitary was offended because he was not given the place of honor. Soon everyone was seated and enjoying the fellowship, with most of the Pharisees present being favorably inclined toward the gospel. When the meal was almost over, a man who had long suffered from a chronic illness and was swollen with dropsy entered the room. This man was a believer and had recently been baptized. He did not ask Jesus for healing, but Jesus knew very well that this man had come to this breakfast hoping to find healing. The man knew that few miracles had been performed recently, but he had hoped in his heart that his pitiable condition might evoke Jesus' compassion. And he was not mistaken, for when he entered the room, he caught the attention of Jesus, as well as an intolerant Pharisee. This Pharisee did not hesitate to express his indignation that such a diseased person was allowed to enter the room. But Jesus looked at the sick man and smiled so kindly that the man dared to come closer and sat on the floor. Jesus looked around at his fellow guests and asked, with a significant glance at the man with dropsy, "Friends, teachers in Israel, I would like to ask you a question. Is it lawful to heal the sick on the Sabbath day?" Those present knew Jesus all too well. They kept silent and did not answer his question. Then Jesus went to the place where the sick man was sitting, took him by the hand, and said, "Stand up and go your way. You have not asked to be healed, but I know the desire of your heart and the faith in your soul." Before the man left the room, Jesus addressed those at the table. "Such works are done by the Father not to tempt you to enter the kingdom but to reveal himself to those who already believe in him and are already in the kingdom. You must understand that it is the Father's will that this man found healing, for which of you, if you had a beloved animal that fell into a pit on the Sabbath day, would not immediately do everything in his power to get it out?" And since no one wanted to answer, and as his host clearly approved of what was happening, Jesus stood and spoke to all those present. Subtly addressing the Pharisee who had thought so highly of himself, "Brothers, do not forget, anyone who exalts himself will be humbled, while he who sincerely humbles himself will be exalted. When you invite people to lunch or when you give a dinner, do not always invite only your friends or family, thinking that they will invite you in return at their feasts, and in this way you will be repaid. When you give a feast, also invite the poor, the maimed, and the blind. In this way, you will be blessed in your heart, for you know very well that these less fortunate cannot repay your loving service." After Jesus had enjoyed the morning meal in the house of a friendly Pharisee, he led the synagogue service in Philadelphia. Abner had arranged for Jesus to teach in the synagogue on this Sabbath day. This was the first time he had led a synagogue service since the synagogues in Galilee and Judea were closed to his teachings by order of the Sanhedrin. At the end of the service, Jesus noticed an older woman sitting in the front row of the women's section. He saw that she had a despondent expression, and her posture was unnaturally bent toward the ground. This woman's spirit had long been gripped by fear, and all joy had left her life. When Jesus came down from the pulpit, he went to her and said, while placing his hand on her shoulder, "Woman, if you would only believe, you could be completely freed from your distressing spirit, and then your weakened body would recover." This woman, who had suffered from severe depression for more than 18 years, so much that her body had also become bent, believed the Master's words and straightened up. To her own amazement, she found that she was standing upright again, and she raised her voice and praised God. This woman's ailment had been entirely mental, as her bent posture was the result of her depressed mind. But the attendees thought that Jesus had miraculously healed a physical deformity. Although the congregation in Philadelphia was favorably inclined toward Jesus' teachings, the leader of the synagogue was hostile toward him. This man was outraged that Jesus had dared to do such a thing on the Sabbath in his synagogue. He stood before the congregation and said, "Are there not 6 days in which one must do all his work? Therefore, come to be healed on these working days, but not on the Sabbath day." When the unfriendly leader said this, Jesus returned to the pulpit and said, "Why do you play the role of a hypocrite? Does not each of you untie his ox on the Sabbath day and lead it out to drink? If such work is allowed on the Sabbath day, should not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, who has been bound by fear for 18 years, be freed from this bondage?" As a result of his open criticism of Jesus, this synagogue leader was removed from his position, and a follower of Jesus was appointed in his place. A day later, on Sunday, February 26, Jesus taught again in the synagogue, and many were baptized by Abner in the river south of the city after the service. The following morning, Jesus and the 10 apostles would have begun their journey back to Pella. Had it not been for one of David's couriers arriving with an urgent message for Jesus about the rapidly deteriorating health of his friend Lazarus.